the smell of cedar and salt air. That's what I remember most clearly from the moment my nephew's hands hit my back. Not the sunset over the Pacific, not the wine glass shattering on the rocks below, not even the sound of my own breathing as I went over. Cedar and salt, the ancient smell of the British Columbia coast, the same coast where I'd proposed to my wife 41 years ago. I dropped maybe 15 feet before my fingers caught the cable railing. Parks Canada had bolted into the cliff face for the hiking trail below. The jolt nearly ripped my arms from all their sockets. My boots scraped against wet granite, finding nothing. Below me, another 90 feet of rock, and then the churning Pacific, gray and cold and endless. Above me, I heard Gavin's voice. "Audrey, Mirelle, come quick. Something's happened." A pause. Then, quieter but not quiet enough, he just collapsed. I think it was his heart. He went right over. Oh God! I hung there in the failing light, 67 years old, my shoulders screaming, rain beginning to spit against the cliff face, and I made a choice. I didn't call out. I didn't shout for help. I needed to hear what Gavin would say next, what he'd do when he believed I was gone. Let me back up. 4 days earlier, I'd been sitting in a boardroom on the 32nd floor of a tower on 8th Avenue in Calgary, signing the final papers that transferred Henley Mineral Technologies to a consortium out of Toronto. $95 million. 34 years of my life reduced to a number on a wire transfer confirmation. My daughter Audrey had flown in from Montreal for the signing. She stood behind my chair, her hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. She didn't say anything when I put the pen down. She just squeezed. Outside, it was -28, the kind of Alberta cold that makes your nose hairs freeze the second you step out. Audrey and I walked to the parking garage without speaking. In the car, engine running, heater blasting, she finally said, "Mom would have made you take her to dinner tonight, somewhere expensive. She would have ordered the most ridiculous thing on the menu and then complained it wasn't as good as her own cooking." I laughed because it was exactly right. Lillian had been gone 3 years. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. She'd spent the last coherent conversation we ever had telling me I'd wasted too much time in that office. "You built something wonderful, Rupert," she'd said, "but you built it with hours that belonged to us. Don't keep doing that after I'm gone." I hadn't listened. After she died, I'd worked harder, longer, burying myself in quarterly reports and drill site inspections, because the alternative was sitting in our empty house in Elbow Park listening to the silence where her voice used to be. But now the company was sold. The silence was all I had left. "I want to do something," I told Audrey. "A trip. Somewhere your mother and I always talked about going but never did." Audrey checked her phone. She ran her own urban planning consultancy in Montreal, the kind of firm that won awards and consumed every waking hour. "Dad, I've got the Plateau Mont Royal rezoning submission due in 4 days, I said. "That's all I'm asking. I booked a lodge on the coast near Tofino. Private, right on the cliff. Your mother always wanted to see the old-growth forest and the gray whales. We never went, because I always had a board meeting or a site visit or some damn thing that seemed important at the time." She looked at me. Really looked, the way Lillian used to when she was deciding whether to push or let go. "Fine," she said. 4 days. The lodge was called Whisper Cliff, a converted heritage house perched on the edge of the Pacific, surrounded by Sitka spruce so tall they blocked the sky. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with a wood stove, and a wraparound deck that hung over the ocean like the prow of a ship. I'd invited 3 people. Audrey, my lawyer Bennett Cross, who'd been with me since I'd incorporated the company out of a rented office in Red Deer, and my nephew Gavin. Gavin was Audrey's age, 36. The son of my brother Donald, who'd died of a heart attack shoveling snow off his driveway in Lethbridge when Gavin was 11. I'd paid for Gavin's education after that, put him through the Haskayne School of Business at U of C, gave him a position at Henley Mineral when he graduated, Director of Business Development. He was sharp, I'll give him that. Good with people, quick with numbers, always the first one to spot an opportunity. Audrey had vouched for him when I'd hesitated about the hire. "He's family, Dad," she'd said. "And he's talented. Give him a chance." "This is going to be incredible, Uncle Rupert," Gavin said when I told him about the trip. He'd driven up from Victoria, where he'd been spending the winter in a condo I'd helped him purchase. "You've earned this, 34 years of grinding, and finally you get to breathe." I should have caught the way he said it. The slight emphasis on earned, the way his eyes moved to the lodge, appraising it like a property listing. But I was tired and sad, and trying to figure out what a man does with himself when the thing that defined him for 3 decades is gone. We arrived on a Wednesday. Audrey put her phone in a drawer within the first hour, which told me the place was working its magic. Bennett showed up looking uncomfortable in hiking boots. He'd brought his laptop, naturally. Gavin was the last to arrive, bearing gifts. A bottle of Okanagan ice wine for me, a cashmere scarf for Audrey, bought in Victoria. "To new beginnings," he said at dinner, raising his glass. Muriel, the lodge's caretaker, a quiet woman from Ukulele who moved through rooms like she was trying not to disturb the air, served us salmon she'd caught that morning and roasted potatoes with rosemary from her garden. We ate on the deck, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun dissolve into the Pacific. "I've been thinking about what to do with the money," I said. "I want to set up a foundation, something for Indigenous communities in northern Alberta, supporting young people who want to start businesses but can't get backing from the banks." Gavin set his fork down. "That's very generous, Uncle Rupert. Have you thought about the tax structure? With the capital gains exemption changes last year, you could shelter a significant portion if you route it through a family trust. The lifetime capital gains exemption has limits, and the CRA is getting aggressive about. I'm not trying to shelter money, Gavin. I'm trying to use it. Of course, I just mean you should talk to an estate planner, someone who specializes in high net worth succession. Make sure everything's set up properly for Audrey, in case I die." I laughed. "I'm 67, not 90. Have you updated your will since Aunt Lillian passed? Named a power of attorney? An executor?" With this kind of estate, probate in Alberta alone could cost Audrey hundreds of thousands, and if the CRA decides to audit the sale. "Gavin," Audrey's voice had an edge. "We're on vacation. You're right. Sorry," he raised his glass again, "to Uncle Rupert, to family." We drank. But I noticed Gavin watching me over the rim of his glass. I'd seen that look before, in boardrooms, across negotiating tables, the look of a man doing calculations. The next morning I woke before dawn and found Gavin on the deck with his laptop open. He closed it when he heard me. "Early riser?" I asked. "Couldn't sleep. Jet lag." He paused. "Victoria to Tofino isn't really jet lag." But he pushed on. "Actually, Uncle Rupert, since you mentioned estate planning last night, I did some reading. Did you know that without a properly structured family trust, the deemed disposition on death could trigger a tax bill of close to $40 million? Audrey could lose almost half the estate before she sees a dollar. That's why I have Bennett. Bennett's a corporate lawyer. No offense, but he's 71. What if something happens to him? You need someone younger who understands the current tax code, someone who could step in as executor, manage the trust, make sure Audrey's protected." He leaned forward. "Someone like me." There it was. The angle, the positioning, the careful framing of self-interest as concern. "Gavin," I said carefully, "I appreciate the thought, but I'm in good health. I walk 5 kilometers every morning. My doctor says my blood works better than most men 10 years younger." "Of course," he smiled. "I didn't mean, I'm just saying it's smart to plan." I left him there and went to find Audrey. She was on the trail behind the lodge, standing in the old-growth forest, head tilted back, staring up at a spruce tree that must have been 800 years old. "Does Gavin seem different to you?" I asked. She considered. "He's always been ambitious. It's what makes him good at his job." "Why?" "He's very interested in what happens to my money when I die. Very interested in being my executor." "Dad, he's probably just trying to help. You did just sell the company for $95 million. People think about these things, maybe. But something sat wrong, a feeling I'd learned to trust over 3 decades of deals that went sideways when I ignored my gut. That afternoon, Gavin suggested we drive up to a viewpoint he'd read about on the highway north of the lodge. Incredible sunset spot, he said, the most dramatic cliff on the island. Bennett stayed behind, claiming a headache. Audrey was game. We drove through cathedral groves and tiny fishing towns, Gavin keeping up a steady stream of facts about the coastal geology, the whale migration, the New Cha Nulth history of the region. At the viewpoint, we parked and walked to the edge. A wooden fence and cable railing marked cliff. The drop was sheer, maybe 150 feet to the rocks and surf below. "Let me get a photo of you two," Gavin said, pulling out his phone. Audrey put her arm around me. We smiled. "Uncle Rupert, how about one of just you, to mark the occasion? First week of retirement, most beautiful coast in the country." I walked to the railing. Gavin followed. "Perfect. Now turn around, look at the ocean. I want to get your expression." I turned my back to him. Heard footsteps. Close. Too close. "Gavin." Audrey's voice uncertain, just getting the right angle. I felt the air shift behind me, felt him close the distance. 43 years ago, I'd done 2 years in the Canadian Forces before university. The instinct was buried deep but not gone. I stepped left. Gavin stumbled forward, catching himself on the railing. "Careful," I said, grabbing his arm. "Rocks are slippery." His face was flushed. "Sorry, lost my footing." But the ground was dry and flat, and his eyes, just for a second, held something I recognized. Not embarrassment, frustration. We drove back in silence. That night at dinner, Gavin was attentive, refilling my glass, suggesting I try the local craft beer Myrell had brought, insisting I relax, take it easy, enjoy myself. I poured the drinks out when he wasn't looking. I hadn't built a company from a rented office in Red Deer to a TSX-listed operation by ignoring warning signs. The next day was my birthday, 67. Myrell had baked a cake, chocolate with blackberry from her garden. Bennett gave me a first edition of Farley Mowat's Never Cry Wolf, which he knew I loved. Audrey gave me a framed photograph, the 3 of us, her, me, and Lillian at Banff when Audrey was 9. "I found it in Mom's papers," she said, "in a box marked Keep Forever." I held it and remembered that day. A rare Saturday I'd skipped the office. Lillian in her red parka, Audrey's gap-toothed grin, the mountains behind us absurdly beautiful, and I'd been checking my BlackBerry half the time. I remembered that too. "Thank you, sweetheart," I managed. Gavin cleared his throat. "My gift, Uncle Rupert, something special." He produced a bottle of wine, a 1957 Bordeaux, your birth year. I tracked it down through a dealer in Vancouver. Must have cost a fortune. He opened it carefully, poured me a glass. Deep red, rich aroma. "Wait." Muriel's voice, sharp and sudden from the kitchen doorway. She stood frozen, staring at Gavin. Everyone turned. She went pale, said something under her breath, and retreated inside. "What was that about?" Audrey asked. Gavin shrugged. "Maybe she doesn't approve of opening expensive wine on a Tuesday." But I'd seen Muriel's face. She'd been afraid. I set the glass down. "You know what? I think the sea air's gotten to me. Feeling a bit off. I'll stick with water tonight." Gavin's jaw tightened. "Come on, Uncle Rupert, one glass. It's your birthday. I went to a lot of trouble to find this bottle. I appreciate that." But no. The table went quiet. Audrey looked from me to Gavin and back. Bennett's eyes narrowed. Gavin stood. "Fine, I need some air." He walked to the edge of the deck where the railing met open sky. I followed him. "Gavin, I didn't mean to be rude. It's fine." He stared out at the water. "Uncle Rupert, can I ask you something, hypothetically?" "Sure." If Audrey couldn't handle $95 million, if she made bad investments, let it drain away on idealistic projects that never turned a profit, wouldn't it be better if someone with financial sense managed it? Someone who understood markets, who'd been in the business world? Audrey is perfectly capable, but what if she's not? What if she's too much like you? Brilliant at what she does, no head for managing real wealth. Wouldn't it make sense if He stopped himself. "If you what, Gavin?" He looked at me, and I saw it plainly. The resentment, the hunger, the bitter arithmetic of a man who'd spent his life standing next to success, close enough to smell it, never close enough to hold it. Nothing. Forget it. He went inside. I stayed on the deck, gripping the railing, my heart hammering. I needed proof. I found Mireille in the kitchen. She was washing dishes with her back to me, her shoulders rigid. "You saw something," I said quietly. "At dinner. What was it?" She shook her head. "Mireille, please." She looked at the doorway, then at me. In a low voice, she told me she'd come in from the garden 2 hours before dinner and seen Gavin through the pantry window. He was at the counter with the bottle of Bordeaux, grinding something with the back of a spoon, tapping powder from a small plastic bag into the wine. He'd been talking to himself. She didn't catch all of it, but she heard enough. Just has to look natural. Old guy, stress of the sale, heart gives out. Happens all the time, nobody questions it. My blood went cold. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" She looked at her hands. "He's your family, your nephew. Who believes the caretaker over family?" She was right. Without evidence, it was her word against his, and Audrey loved him. She'd never believed the boy she'd grown up with could do this. "Mireille, does the lodge have any security cameras?" She nodded. "One in the hallway. One pointed at the kitchen counter. Can you pull the footage from this afternoon?" We went to her office, a small room off the mudroom. The camera feed was basic, motion-activated, stored on a hard drive. She found the timestamp. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Gavin entering the kitchen, checking the doorway, setting the bottle on the counter. He pulled a small bag from his jacket pocket, tapped powder onto the counter, crushed it with the back of a spoon, uncorked the wine, funneled the powder in with a folded piece of paper, recorked the bottle, wiped the counter. 90 seconds. "Can you copy this to a USB drive?" "Yes." "And Mireille, don't tell anyone." "Not yet." I found Bennett in his room reading. I closed the door and told him everything. The estate questions, the viewpoint, the wine, the footage. His face went gray. "We need to call the RCMP and tell them what? That my nephew asked me about estate planning and gave me a glass of wine. Without a lab analysis of whatever he put in that bottle, without catching him in the act, it's circumstantial." His lawyer would tear it apart. "Then what?" "I need him to show his hand, openly, with witnesses and proof no one can argue with." "Rupert, you're talking about using yourself as bait. That's insane. It's the only way to make this stick." I looked at him. "Will you help me? Lillian would haunt me forever if I agreed to this." Lillian would understand. She always understood. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. We made a plan. I would go along with Gavin's next photo opportunity, whatever it was. Bennett and Mireille would watch from concealed positions. Mireille would set her phone to record video from inside the lodge, angled at the deck. Bennett would record audio on his phone from the lower trail. If Gavin acted, we'd have it from multiple angles. I found Gavin in the kitchen, pouring himself a scotch. "Hey," I said. "Sorry about before. I've been on edge since the sale. Big change, you know? Let's do that photo you wanted." Light's still beautiful. His expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation, then that easy smile. "Really? Yeah, let's go." We walked out to the deck. The sun was low, painting everything amber and copper. I could see Mireille's phone propped inside the kitchen window, recording. Bennett was on the lower trail, pretending to examine tide pools. I walked to the edge of the deck. The railing here was waist-high, wooden, and beyond it the cliff dropped straight down to the rocks and the cable hiking railing 15 feet below, then nothing but air and ocean. Gavin followed, phone raised. "This is going to be perfect, Uncle Rupert. Turn around. Look at the sunset. I want to capture your expression." I turned my back to him. Every nerve in my body screamed. I forced myself to breathe, heard his breathing change, heard the soft sound of his phone sliding into his jacket pocket, heard his shoes on the wooden deck, 1 step, 2 steps, close. "Gavin," Audrey's voice from the doorway. She'd come out with a cup of tea. "What are you doing?" "Taking a photo," he said. Voice tight. "You're not holding your phone." The silence lasted half a second. Then I felt his hands, both palms, hard, between my shoulder blades. The shove was violent, committed, the push of a man who meant it. I hit the railing and went over. Twisted, reached, my fingers caught the top rail and held for 1 second before my weight tore them free. I fell 15 feet. My hands found the cable railing bolted into the cliff face, the one for the hiking trail. Pain like fire shot through my shoulders, my wrists, my back, but I held on. I pulled my legs up, wrapped them around the cable, locked my ankles. Above me, Gavin's voice. Audrey. Myrelle, come quick. Uncle Rupert collapsed. His heart, I think. He went over the edge. It happened so fast. Footsteps. Audrey's scream. Dad! Dad! We need to call for help, Gavin said. Then, lower, but not low enough. Audrey, wait. Think about this. If they find him down there, the investigation, the press, the question, it would be better if we said he collapsed inside. Cardiac event. Died in his sleep. Peaceful. Nobody needs to know about the cliff. Better for whom? Audrey's voice was ice. For everyone. For his legacy. For you. Think about what the media will do with this. Tech mogul falls off cliff. They'll turn his whole life into a tabloid story. You want to lie about how my father died. I'm trying to protect you. Protect his memory. And the estate. If there's an investigation, probate could be frozen for months, maybe years. The CRA could open a full audit you might not see a dollar for. So this is about money. Audrey, listen to me. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. That $95 million needs someone who can manage it properly. I've been handling business development for 6 years. I understand the markets, the structures. You think you deserve his money more than I do. I earned it. Gavin's voice cracked open, and what came through was raw. You want to know what it's like being the charity case? The nephew who's only here because his father died shoveling a driveway in Lethbridge? I watched Vincent hand everything to you. The company, the trust fund, the house. Just because you're his daughter. I worked twice as hard. I brought in half the deals that made that sale possible, and he was going to give $95 million to strangers, to some foundation. While I scrambled to make payments on a condo, he helped me buy like I was some kind of pet project. So you pushed him. I took what should have been mine. Sirens. Distant but closing. Myrelle had already called. I hung on the cable, my arms shaking, rain on my face, and listened to Nephew confess to killing me. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I felt something close to grief. Bennett's voice from the trail below. I've recorded this entire conversation, and Myrelle has security camera footage from the kitchen showing you tampering with that wine bottle. I'd suggest you stop talking. A pause. Uncle Rupert? Bennett called down. You still with us? Barely, I said. Someone might want to help me up before I end up in the Pacific. More screams from Audrey, but different now. Relief. Disbelief. Dad, Dad, oh my God. Dad, you're alive. Just about, I grunted. It took all 3 of them to pull me up. Bennett and Myrelle hauling from the trail, Audrey reaching over the railing. I collapsed on the deck, every muscle in my body trembling. Audrey dropped beside me and held on like she was 9 years old again and afraid of the dark. Gavin stood against the lodge wall. His face was the color of old snow. This isn't what it looks like. I can explain. Save it, Bennett said. The RCMP arrived 12 minutes later. 2 officers from the Tofino detachment, plus an ambulance from the hospital in town. The paramedics checked me out, bruised ribs, strained rotator cuffs, mild hypothermia, but nothing broken. They wanted to take me to Tofino General. I refused. I wanted to see this through. They took Gavin in handcuffs. He didn't look at me as they walked him to the cruiser. He looked at the trees, at the ground, at the darkening sky. Anywhere but my eyes. That night, Audrey and I sat on the deck. Same spot. The rain had stopped, and the stars were out. More stars than you ever see in Calgary. The whole Milky Way sprawled above the Pacific like someone had spilled a bag of salt across black velvet. Lillian would have loved this, I thought. We didn't speak for a long time. I brought him into the company, Audrey said finally. I vouched for him. This is my fault. You didn't know. The signs were there. He was always comparing himself, always keeping score. Who got what bonus? Who got invited to which meeting? Who got the better office? I thought it was just ambition. I thought. Her voice broke. You didn't lose me, I said. I'm right here. Why didn't you tell me what he was planning? Because I wasn't sure. Because I needed to protect you from the chance that I was wrong, that I was seeing things. And because I paused. Because I knew you'd stop me. And we needed proof. You used yourself as bait. I did. That was the stupidest thing you've ever done. Considering my track record, that's saying something. She laughed through her tears. Mom would have killed you. Your mother is probably killing me right now wherever she is. Silence. The waves below, steady and patient. Dad, I'm taking a leave from the firm. 3 months. Maybe longer. Audrey, you don't. Yes, I do. You were right. Mom was right. I've been doing the same thing you did. 80-hour weeks, missed dinners, relationships I let die because there was always another deadline. I almost lost you without ever really knowing you. The real you. Not just the Sunday phone calls and the Christmas visits. She took my hand. Tell me about your life. Tell me about Mom. Tell me about before the company, before the success. Tell me the things that mattered. My throat closed up. I'd waited 36 years to hear my daughter say that. I'd like that, I managed. And the foundation. I want to help, not just money. Time. Real time. I want to design the spaces. Community hubs, makerspaces, the kind of places that don't exist in northern communities because nobody with resources ever bothered. We stayed in British Columbia for 2 more weeks while the legal process began. Gavin was charged with attempted murder, administering a noxious substance with intent to endanger life, and fraud. The RCMP forensic lab confirmed the powder in the wine was a concentrated cardiac glycoside, enough to induce a fatal arrhythmia in a man my age. They also found evidence he'd been skimming from Henley Minerals' business development accounts for 2 years, funneling money through shell companies to cover gambling debts he'd racked up at casinos in Victoria and Vancouver. Bennett estimated the total embezzlement at just over $1.4 million. Audrey and I talked, not the careful, surface-level conversations we'd had for 20 years, but the real ones, the hard ones. I told her about growing up in Drumheller, about meeting Lillian at a dance in Red Deer when I was 23 and she was 21, and wearing a yellow dress I can still see if I close my eyes. I told her about the early days of the company, working out of a rented office above a hardware store, Lillian doing the books on a card table in the kitchen, while Audrey slept in a playpen beside her. She told me about her loneliness, about the pressure of carrying my name, my reputation, the weight of being Rupert Henley's daughter in a world that assumed everything she'd achieved had been handed to her, about the relationships she'd walked away from because she didn't know how to be present for another person when she'd never learned it from me. That one hurt, because she was right. On our last day in Tofino, we walked down the trail to the cable railing where I'd hung. Someone had tied a small bundle of cedar and sage to the cable. Mirelle admitted she'd done it. A blessing, she said, for the place where you chose to hold on. I stood there with Audrey, looking out at the Pacific. You know what I thought about when I was hanging from that cable? I said. I thought about all the moments I missed. Every recital, every birthday, every time I chose a conference call over a conversation with your mother, every Saturday morning I went to the office instead of taking you to the mountains. And I thought, if I survive this, I'm going to make different choices. So what's first? First, we build this foundation together, and second, I turned to her. Do you remember when you were 8 and I tried to teach you to skate at the Stampede rink? You told me skating was boring and you'd rather be drawing buildings. She smiled. You were so disappointed. I wasn't disappointed in you. I was disappointed in myself for pushing my thing on you instead of asking about yours. So I'm asking now. What do you want to do, Audrey? Not what you think you should do. Not what would make me proud. What would make you happy? She didn't answer right away. She looked at the ocean, at the cliffs, at the forest rising behind us like a green wall. I want to design for the people who never get designed for. First Nations communities, northern towns, the places that get prefab boxes dropped on them and told to be grateful. I want to build beautiful, warm, functional spaces for people who've never had an architect care about them. I want my work to mean something beyond awards and magazine covers. Then that's what you'll do. Just like that, just like that. Life's too short for anything else. We flew back to Calgary the following week. The story had made national news. CTV, CBC, The Globe, The National Post. Alberta tech mogul survives Nephew's murder plot. I gave one interview to a journalist at the Calgary Herald I'd known for 20 years, and then I stopped answering calls. I didn't want to be known for surviving. I wanted to be known for what I did after. The foundation launched 6 months later. The Lillian Henley Foundation for Northern Enterprise, named after my wife. Audrey designed the first community hub herself in a Dean community north of Fort McMurray. Warm timber, natural light, spaces that respected the land and the people who'd lived on it for thousands of years. We funded 32 ventures the first year, 89 the second. Gavin pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He received 22 years. The judge, a woman from Prince George who'd seen enough resource sector greed to fill a courthouse, said at sentencing, "You didn't just try to kill your uncle. You tried to destroy the trust that holds a family together. I hope you use your time to understand the difference between what you wanted and what you deserved." I went to see him once, 4 months into his sentence at Mountain Institution. He diminished, smaller. We sat across a plastic table in the visiting room. "I suppose you want an apology," he said. "No, an apology would mean you understood what you did. I don't think you do yet. I wanted what you had. Is that so terrible? Wanting it? No. Being willing to kill for it? Yes." I leaned forward. "Gavin, if you'd come to me and said you were in trouble, that you had debts, that you were drowning, I would have helped you. No questions. But you didn't want help. You wanted to take. There's a difference. Easy for you to say. You've never had to watch someone else get everything while you get the scraps. I worked 80-hour weeks for 34 years. I missed my daughter's childhood. I barely knew my wife before she died. I struggled, Gavin. I just struggled for different things." He looked away. "I hope someday you understand what I mean," I said. I stood and left. I haven't been back. People ask me if I've forgiven him. I tell them forgiveness isn't quite the word. I released it. The anger, the betrayal, the what-ifs. He'll carry what he did for the rest of his life. I refuse to carry it with him. Audrey and I have dinner together every week now, sometimes in Calgary, sometimes in Montreal, sometimes on video when the distance is too much. We take trips. So far, we've been to Haida Gwaii, to Iceland, to the Amalfi Coast, where Lillian always dreamed of going. We don't talk about business much. We talk about books, about buildings, about memories of her mother. We talk about the things that matter. I think about that moment on the cliff sometimes, hanging from a cable railing in the rain, my arms giving out, the Pacific roaring below me. The decision I made to hold on, to stay quiet, to let the truth come out on its own terms, changed everything. But the more important decision came after. The decision about what to do with the life I'd been given back. Last month, Audrey called me at 11:30 at night. "Dad, I'm sorry to wake you, but I have to tell you. I'm pregnant. I'm going to be a grandfather. And this time, I'm going to be there. Every first word, every stumbling step, every school, play and birthday party and Saturday morning at the park. Not because I have to, but because I finally understand what Lillian tried to teach me all those years. Success isn't measured in share price or quarterly earnings or the number of zeros on a wire transfer. It's measured in presence, in moments, in love." I'm sitting on my balcony now, watching the Chinook Arch form over the Rockies, thinking about salt air and cedar and cable railings and the choices that define a life. Thinking about a nephew consumed by greed and a daughter learning to choose people over project. Thinking about second chances and how few of us get them. If there's a lesson in any of this, it's simple. Hold on. When life pushes you over the edge, find something to grab. And when you pull yourself back up, make sure you're climbing towards something worth the effort. Family, love, time. These are the things worth holding on to. Everything else, you can let fall.